Alrighty guys, I'm going to try to do this. I can't edit, so I'm going to try to do this in one take, and hopefully it turns out good. I'll probably mess it up pretty bad, but we have hit 3,000 subscribers. Never thought I'd be there in the 7+ years that I've had a channel. First it never seemed like it was going anywhere. I'm only going on about 3 hours of sleep, but I thought we'd discuss some tips and tricks. I keep getting asked on some of the other videos that I put out on tips and tricks if I still believe in the theories that I put out, and I think so. As you know, as we evolve in this game, you know, things do change. There's different style saws that you encounter, and you gotta kind of flip and flop things. And what I'm gonna discuss in here is not the right way. I'm really beyond the drama. In fact, with everything going on in my life, I could give two squats less about the drama in this field. Like I said, when I used to build race engines, I mean, there's a little bit of drama in, you know, building big race engines and mud boggers and drag car engines and stuff like that, but I've never seen anything like the drama that's created in our little community of chainsaws. And it's not just build techniques, it's chain sharpening. It stems from every aspect of the saw, from fuels to blowdown to high exhaust roof, low exhaust roofs, long intake, short intake, pop-up piston, not pop-up piston, cut chamber, not cut chamber. It's unreal. What I'm going to discuss in here pertains to nobody. It's just what I've got coming spewing it. It's hard. What I have in my head, it's hard to get out of my head and onto the table and to explain to you guys. So just take note of that. I don't have any editing skills. As you know, as far as things go, there's always, I don't care how good of a porter you are or that you think you are, there's always somebody better, guaranteed. I've seen it in the race world. I've seen it, you know, all over. In any sport, any aspect. It doesn't matter if it's typing on a keyboard on a computer. There's going to be somebody that can type faster than you, always. If you're a boxer, there's always somebody that's going to come along and be better than you, or better than you on that day, or however. That we all serve a purpose, as a teacher once told me. If you judge, a good example of that teacher told me a long time ago is, if you judge, say you got a fish, a monkey, and an elephant, and you judge that elephant and the fish by how good that can climb a tree, they're going to seem pretty stupid compared to the monkey. But if you take that same tree and judge it, all three of them, by who can knock the tree over, obviously the elephant's the better thing. If you're going to judge who can swim the best, obviously the fish is going to take it. So everybody has a purpose, and I just wish we could get along. There's so much hatred in the world right now. We could all make it a better place. But so let's get talking about some things. On an internal combustion engine, whether it be 2-stroke or 4-stroke, we're working off from a certain theory. One of the theories is air-fuel mixture. You got your fuel, and I have horrible spelling, guys. You have your fuel ratio. Flies flying around me. You got your fuel ratio. In a perfect world, that would be 14.7. And that would be in a perfect world. And what that means is your fuel. Let's do a different marker here. Let's say your fuel. This would be the fuel. And in a perfect world, it would be mixed with air to this 14.7, and when that combusts, that would leave no unspent fuel or air in a perfect world. Well, 99% of the time, you never achieve, an engine is just not efficient enough to achieve that. You want to try to shoot for that, but it just doesn't happen. So that's your fuel, you know, to air ratio. And like I said, when that ignites, once that's all combusted, there's no air left in there, but there's no unspent fuel either. And that works out to, I believe it is 1 gram of fuel to 14.7 grams of air is what that is. So once you understand that, we can move on to the next thing. We're surrounded by pressure, atmospheric pressure, and I believe, off the top of my head, I believe it's 14.697 is our atmospheric pressure. That is how much pressure, pressure is around us, the engine, everything. Because I've seen some videos where people are talking about, sounds like the neighbors are lighting off stuff. I've seen some videos where people are talking about how this isn't an air pump. This is an air pump. No matter which way you look at it, this is an air displacement pump. You're taking air from one side and displacing it to another side. When this starts to go up, you are changing this pressure. This is the standard pressure. If you lower, say this starts to come up and this turns into like 10 or something, you are lowering this pressure, which is creating a vacuum. So when this cracks, your air charge is rushing in to fill this void. It's negative. It's got to fill it back to the 14.967. If it fills anything above that, you are essentially boosting it. Well, as far as I know, they ain't come up with a boosted chainsaw that's for sale yet. But there was another guy saying that air is pushed through. That's not the case. This is just the standard. A carburetor, if you're pushing air through a carburetor, then you're using like forced induction, like a blower or something, or a turbo, and you're pushing air through it. This is pulling air through it, but it will only pull at its maximum once the inside of here reaches this. It's done pulling on a chainsaw. It will not pull any more than that. So as that comes up, it's already compressing your charge from the previous cycle or whatever. But let's just say it was here and we go to start the saw or whatever. It's creating a negative pressure as you're pulling it over. She cracks open. Your fuel air charge is rushing in. Comes around. Now, once that port right there shuts off, now this is a compressor part at this stage. Now, every increment that this comes down, you are now increasing above this. So now this is becoming pressurized, and it's going to keep pressurizing it right up till your transfers crack. And because, let's say you've compressed this, just oddball, to fit to 15 or 16, or now this is going to try to escape. It's going to go up the transfers and try to fill this void, because now that, well, this thing ain't rolling too good. I got dirt in the bearing. But it's going to try to fill this void to this pressure right here. And once that hits bottom dead center, you know, it's pretty much done its thing. And then it's going to come around, and once that shuts off there, this is starting the negative pressure side again, and you're compressing this side. Well, once you pass that exhaust port right there, now you're compressing from here to here, and that's got your air charge, and if all is good, you're as close to this 14.7 as you can get. And then as it comes up, it compresses it, and fuel burns at a given rate. It does not change. Only, you know, you can change fuels, and each fuel has a different burn rate. That's why there's ignition timing. Now, if you were to have this spark exactly at top dead center, as that charge is ignited in there, it's expanding in all directions. So here's the cylinder wall and the piston, and here's your combustion chamber. It's expanding in all directions because it burns at a given rate. If you have that firing at top dead center, as this is coming down, it's still, as this cracked open, it's still trying to expand as it's going out the exhaust, and you're not getting your desired result. The goal is you know, like on race engines, just like general rule of thumb, at idle it was about 10 degrees before top dead center, 10-12 degrees, somewhere in there. And the reason it would fire before then is because this is all a timed event, that you need to get that charge burning sooner to extract the most power out of it. If you ignite it too soon, it'll actually try to push back on your piston and cause you to lose power as well. But so let's say that 10 degrees, because you have from here to here to extract everything out of your power stroke that you can get. It's just the way it is, because as soon as the exhaust opens, it just dumped the pressure. It just lost the exertion on the piston. You just dumped your pressure. So, but say this is idling at 3,000. You know, because fuel burns at a given rate, it changes. So at 8, 9, 10, 12,000, whatever, you need more timing advance at that RPM to get your fuel burning sooner. I hope I'm trying to make that as clear as I can make for you guys. So that 12,000 RPM, you're probably going to want it to start the spark right there. You know, that'd be 0. That's probably, yeah, probably about right in there. You know, the ideal way to do it is check it with the timing light or whatever. But so that covers that. As this is coming down, as soon as that cracks, it lets it out. Now, if your exhaust is stifled up, I don't have a muffler here, but if your exhaust is really restrictive, when this charge comes in there, it's going to hold pressure here and have more pressure here than what's in here from the case compression. And what happens there is when them transfers crack open, if you have too much exhaust gas pressure there, it's actually going to force some of the charge that's already spent. It's your spent gases. You've done extracted what you could get out of it. So any spent gas that goes down your transfers and into your crankcase, which I call reversion, that is now taking up space that you got to evacuate that back out, that you're not getting fresh charge in there. Now, one way to cure reversion is longer blowdown. Now, shorter blowdown is where they start to open sooner. If your exhaust is really free flowing, you can typically get away with a shorter blowdown. If your transfers are compromised, like this is kind of an outdated cylinder here. Like on a quad loop, you would have, let's see here, get this stuff off. On a quad loop, let's say here's your cylinder wall. On a closed quad loop, I should say. There's the chamber. And you got your intake and your exhaust. Your transfers would be like right here and right here. They're kind of messed up there or whatever. Some quad loops have a big lower down here where it's got the loops that come up and feed them. What I call front fed, like on the newer stratified saws, they have a tunnel, and most of them are on the front up here, and it comes up, and that tunnel, like let's say here's the bottom of your cylinder on a front fed. You got your quads up inside the cylinder. You have one little tiny square on each side feeding two transfers. I call that compromised, because you know you're going to get a high velocity out of that, but you're not going to get a huge flow. So on these builds, I run a shorter blowdown because I need the longer transfer duration, and the transfer duration is how long the transfers are opened. You know, that I need a longer transfer duration in a compromised front fed transfer setup to adequately fill the cylinder. On the plus side, a smaller transfer has a higher velocity and it's more restrictive, and it's less likelihood to get reversion down it, if that makes sense. On a saw that's got massive, absolutely massive uppers, I like to run a longer blowdown, so I can longer time to build more pressure in here, so when it cracks open I can get my velocity up. And that's another one of them controversial subjects. So that's that. The saws that I run short blowdown on are front fed transfers, like let's say 461, 500i, 661. Another one that I run short blowdown in, and most of them are front fed as well, are stratified saws. The stratification process pumps air into that into your tunnel there, so it effectively seals it off to stop raw fuel from going out to meet the EPA's bullcrap. So I like to have longer transfer duration on stratified saws, so I get time to get that air out so I can get my fuel in. Those are the only two types of cylinders that I run, have had success in running short blowdown and seem to be really responsive on it. On the older style saws, when I'd run short blowdown in them and then have dyno runs and stuff pulled, the saw would be real peaky on the graft. On saws that I gave them 5 to 7 degrees more, on this style I typically, bare minimum's 20. Now let's talk about what is short blowdown. To me, short blowdown is 18 to 12 or less. I know a couple of guys that like to run 10. That's short, so we'll put short there. Medium / long is 20 to 25 is what I call. Long is 25 to 30 plus. And I've got some out there that's running 33. I've got a 4910 out there that's running 33 degrees of blowdown, and it's pretty peppy. It made 5.72 horse. So yeah, but like on this style transfer setup, when I have them pulled with medium to long blowdown, the graph looks more like this. I have a much broader usable power band where it carries the power for longer, and a lot of times that's my particular fun saw. Like if I'm production falling or production, cutting up trees and stuff, especially if I'm felling a tree, this gives you a long, broad power band, and your saw's not stalling out in the cuts. Typically, when you build one like this, a lot of times though, if you're cutting cookies or something and you keep it at this little peak area, yeah, that thing flies like the dickens. But then you go out and put it in a real world situation, and as soon as your felling dogs touch and the saw comes up, on a big solid piece of wood, it stalls out in the cut, and that drives me absolutely bonkers. Now the stratifieds and the front feds, they seem to carry the short blowdown considerably longer, and I think it has to do with the torque that you're getting from the higher velocity of the transfer design. So that's another thing too. Like there's different ways to build. This is gonna be a long drug out video, guys, and I'm doing a horrible job at butchering this stuff. On the quad loops, on the quad loop ones, a lot of builders favor cutting the chamber and raising the roof or lowering the roof after they do all the base work. Say stock it was at 100. They'll do all their machine work and stuff. They'll like to move it to 107, and they'll run that exhaust number right there with 18 to 12 degrees of blowdown. And I know there's probably a few builders out there that's going to get mad that I'm giving this information out, but whatever. So say they took it from 100 to 107, they gave it 18 to 12 degrees. Sometimes they'll split them, and then they'll run between 73 to 77 on the intake. And the reason they're running a lower intake is so they got, a lower intake. This would be higher. They have a longer compression time to build the pressure up because they've compromised their pressure by the short blowdown. And how they're getting their torque is the longer, or the lower exhaust roof right here has a longer time to build power in the cylinder, and they're getting their RPM this way. A lot of builders build that way. I don't typically build that way. I've tried it out. You can get good gains that way. I would much rather, on this style, I would much rather do 100 on the roof, still cut my chamber and stuff, get my duration up there, and I would rather have 20 to 25 blowdown with between 80 and 84 on the intake. That's my particular style. And there's some that say having the long duration on the intake sacrifices your throttle response and makes them pigs and sluggish and all that. I haven't. And certain saws, if you over intake them, yes, it can happen. But if you do your port shapes play a lot and everything too. We'll get into that probably in a different, well, maybe we'll discuss it a little bit too. You know, like on a front fed saw, I would probably do 100, and I'd probably do like 118 to 115, and then, you know, especially if this is a straddle saw, I would be anywhere between 85 and 90 for my intake. If that was a straddle or front fed, that's just, and I would also cut the chamber, do the base work, all that good stuff. So this just gives you guys some different ideas. You can take your exhaust ports. Let's say if one exhaust port's like this, and this is the top of the roof. I hate that style exhaust. Another one that's pretty common, just they'll shape it like this. I kind of butchered that a little bit, but it'll have a wider spot on each side. These are somewhat dangerous if you you know, get pretty wide on to the size of the bore. Pretty easy to hang a ring. Ones I like, I'll actually have a little flatter top part, and then I'll bring them down, you know, like this, and then I'll round. When I widen it, I'll round the corners. That's the type I typically shoot for. And depending on, say if this is on 102, I can manipulate by how flat I go on the top of this with still a slight arch, because you can't go completely flat, but how I'm changing the ray of light when it comes through there, I can manipulate. I can make that 102 behave like 96 or 98 on the roof, just by manipulating my exhaust port. Another thing to consider, sometimes going wider, and I found this out on the 500i's too, by going wider, sometimes you're killing your velocity. Sometimes just 30-40 thousandths on each side is more than enough. Keeps your velocity up, because if your exhaust is coming out of there at a very rapid pace, it can also help pull the charge out of the crankcase and give you a good boost in power. I see a lot of shapes like this factory. I hate that. I would come in there and, you know, reshape that, and when I widen it, I would give this some rounded thing. And if at bottom dead center, if this is above your piston, then I would lower to the height of your piston. If your piston is already above it, then I never touch the floor. So that's just something else to consider too. Now another big topic is compression, guys. Holy cow, this is I learned a long time ago. A good example is gunpowder. If you take gunpowder and just put it in a pile out in the open and light it on fire, it just fizzles. If you take that same amount of gunpowder and put it in a compressed space, you get a huge bang. And same thing with air fuel charge. If you're, say, got 120 pounds of compression, that when that ignites, it's only going to apply a certain amount of force down. You take that same saw, cut your chamber, or do a pop-up, or however you want to do it. Sometimes I'll do a little of both, and bump that thing up to, sounds like we're getting a big rainstorm now. We need that rain bad. So you bump it up to 180 to 200 pounds. I've got some as much as 235. Anything I've ever pushed past 235 has gave me issues. Anything over 235, I'd recommend some better fuel. All this stuff that I'm showing you guys, I run 87 octane on my stuff. It's a more reactive fuel. As long as it's not pre-detonating, when it's coming up to top dead center, I run 87. If it starts to pre-detonate, then I have to switch my game plan up. But if you increase your compression here, you get a bigger bang and applies more power down on your strobe. So That's my theory on that. Let's talk about combustion chambers. You guys hear me talk about combustion chambers quite a bit. Yeah, butchered that, didn't I, guys? Never said I was an artist. Now, this is pretty common. There's some other ones where this side's a little smaller and there's D-shape and so on and so forth. But cutting a band, that's where you come in here and either use like Dino Joe's cutter, or by put it in an apparatus and get it in my lathe, and I come in with a boring tool, you know, with a cutter, and as it's twirling around I come in there and I cut between 30 and 50 out of the band. Typically I don't go much more than 55, just because you start running into the ring of death is what we call it. And if you're cutting off on your piston, let's say if I'm going to do a pop-up, I might cut 30 off the piston and then only cut 20 out of the band. And the reason I did that is because I just changed where this piston ring locates, and I can't chance that ring running past the plating. But when I cut them chambers on just a flat band cut, you just shrunk your combustion chamber area. And very, very important, if you are raising your exhaust roof at all, it is almost imperative, because every 10 thousandths that you raise that roof, you're killing 10 pounds roughly. From what I've tested, you're killing roughly every 10 thousandths that you raise that exhaust roof, you're knocking 10 pounds of static compression off. So you have to shrink your chamber to get your compression back. If you raise your exhaust roof and don't shrink your chamber, you just took a saw that, let's say, was 120 pounds, and let's say you raised your exhaust roof 2 degrees, which is roughly 20 thousandths. You now got a saw at 100 pounds of compression, and you gained some RPM, but you just killed a crap load of torque off that saw. Now, when you hear me, you know, when we talk about pop-ups, sometimes you can buy a pop-up. What the pop-up does is, here's your piston, and then it's got a pop-up that stuffs up inside that combustion chamber. It gives you a little bit of a boost. Typically, like on a clamshell that you can't do the machine work, if they offer a pop-up, I wish they offered pop-ups for every clamshell out there, because it does give you a little boost in power. Because I either got to come in and weld in a chamber on a clamshell to boost the compression, or I can stuff a pop-up in it. But typically, if you're raising your roof and you can add a pop-up, typically you can get a little bit of your torque back that way. Another one that you guys hear me talking about is them button taper tops. And that's where I take a piston. Oh, I butchered that one, guys. I take a piston, and then you got your rings. And I got to be careful how much I cut off, but I come in on an angle. And I cut the edges of the pistons off, and now my piston looks like that. And then I will come in, when I cut that chamber, you guys hear me saying about how I match the chamber. That's where I match the chamber to my button top. And sometimes I just do a nice gentle